Janet Cunningham with the University of Utah's Communication Office, and I'm talking to Christie Toth, Assistant Professor of Writing and Rhetoric Studies, about the value of being an effective writer in our evolving and constantly changing world. As writing is a key component in nearly every career, Christie's department offers majors, minors, and courses for non-majors to help students develop critical abilities for their future jobs. First of all, Christie, thanks for talking to us today.
Glad to be here.
Let's just dive right in. What is the goal of the Department of Writing and Rhetoric Studies?
Well, the way I like to talk about it with students is that if we have one overarching goal for our major, we can't teach you how to do all the kinds of writing, A, because there's way too many kinds of writing, and B, because what writing is and what makes it effective is changing, has always been changing, but is changing really fast right now. So we can't prepare you how to do every single thing that you're going to need to do over the next 60 years because nobody knows what that's going to look like at this point. But what I tell students is that our goal is really to give you the kind of superpower of what some people in our field call rhetorical dexterity, which is just a fancy way of saying that you're able to walk into any kind of situation that's going to require you to write or communicate and figure out how to successfully accomplish what you want to accomplish in that space. Figure out who are these people, what are they up to, what do they value, who are you, what do you value, what are you trying to do, and how can you bridge that gap, figure out the ways that people communicate in that space and do it successfully. So that could be in careers and is valuable in a lot of workplaces, but that also includes a lot of civic and activist spaces, community spaces, faith-based spaces. I got students who are amazing fan fiction writers. That can be all the different places where people use writing in the world, thinking about how to do what you want to do.
Can you maybe explore a little bit about why this is important?
It's an interesting time to be thinking about that question because I had a couple of students, I remember this spring in my senior seminar, which is our capstone course for students that is kind of the last class that they take as they're finishing up their major, who said, I came into writing and rhetoric studies because I was interested in writing or because I took a class I really loved and wanted to do more. But now that I'm finishing up now in spring 2017, I feel like I majored in exactly the right thing to kind of understand what's going on at this really complicated moment in our history, how the ways that people are using language and writing technologies are shaping the ways we are and aren't able to communicate with each other, and how we're trying to figure out how to work through those challenges across those gaps and figure out what our future as a nation, as a state is going to look like. If you're talking about like the big stakes of this kind of work, I feel like what our students come out with is a really keen ability to listen to how people are talking, look at how people are crafting messages, to think critically about that, but also figure out how to engage with it and participate and make change. Our courses are, rigorous and involve reading challenging texts, but they almost always involve also making in all kinds of ways, using language, using writing, using digital media. We want students to be participating and engaging and making things from the get-go, not just as like a final experience, but from their first days in our classes.
So what are the areas of study within writing and rhetoric that students will participate in when they're here?
So I tell students a lot that we're a major that is by design intended to be a good double major if students want to pair us with just about anything. Writing, as you said, involves basically any career and other kinds of civic engagement that students are going to go on to do. It's going to involve writing in some capacity. And so we see ourselves as pairing well with just about anything else that you could study at the university. And we have students in all kinds of majors from, psychology and sociology to social work to computer science, mathematics, a lot of students in engineering and pre-med, pre-law, a lot of students double majoring with us in political science because they're particularly interested in crafting messages in the sort of public sphere. Because we pair well with lots of things, we're also designed to be a very flexible major. So we have 2 required courses that are sort of like the gateway courses where you sort of get a conceptual understanding of how we talk about writing and rhetoric when we're talking about writing and rhetoric in our field. With those kind of gateway courses in place, basically it's choose your own adventure until senior seminar. And so we have a lot of different courses in a lot of different areas because depending on what it is that students are pairing with us or what they're seeing themselves doing after they graduate, different kinds of combinations of courses will make more or less sense for different students. So we have a number of different courses that are geared towards like professional technical writing, web design and usability testing, courses for people that really see themselves going to work for either companies or the nonprofit sector or the public sector, as somebody who's going to be doing a lot of the writing in those spaces for whoever their employer is. We also have a lot of other classes that are geared more towards, sort of social justice, civic engagement, activism for students who are really interested in thinking about the ways that writing and rhetoric sort of shape structures of inequality, but are also used to challenge inequality. A lot of our classes have a kind of have an emphasis on difference and diversity and what writing has been and can be in those different kinds of contexts. We have a number of classes that are geared more towards people that are say they want to. We have a lot of pre-med students because this major makes sense for a lot of pre-med students who want to get some of that humanities grounding while also doing all of the science coursework that they need to do to apply to medical school. And so we have students that have courses that look at writing in the sciences, writing in the health professions. We have courses on legal writing as well. So there's some courses that focus on particular kinds of professional areas that students might go on to graduate school in. We also have a lot of classes that focus more on digital, so things like digital storytelling, sound composing, the rhetorics of music, things for people who maybe want to go on and work in things like game design or where they'll be composing in these online spaces using a lot of digital tools.
So can you talk a little bit about what kind of job opportunities are available for someone with a major in writing and rhetoric studies who's not necessarily double majoring?
So some of the paths that I've seen students taking, I mean, like I said, because we kind of pair well with anything, one of the things that our major offers is a way for students to signal, through their major and their degree that they have this additional grounding and expertise in writing, which seems to be attractive to a lot of different employers. So, I've had several students who they were already working at companies where they had jobs and maybe they liked their company, but they didn't like their specific job so much. And they've been able to use their writing and rhetoric studies degree to basically move within those companies. We've had other students go on and get hired as technical professional writers in different companies. The Salt Lake area has a really robust instructional design industry, and so we've had students that are going on to get jobs at places like Canvas. We've had a couple of our students now go on to law school. We have students who are applying to medical school right now. I'm trying to think. We've had a couple of students going on to graduate study in writing and rhetoric studies as well. I have several students from this last year who are now have paid employment with different political campaigns, sort of locally or at the state level. And students who've actually gotten jobs out of state in working for nonprofit organizations. So, and we also have students who are doing freelance writing. Another one of my students who I've worked with closely, he started out in a job where he was doing some writing for the Natural History Museum here as a student employee and did such a great job that they hired him full time after he finished up. And he's like their science writer that writes their blog to, communicate with the public about science. So, that's another interesting area that comes out of our field is people who can specialize in certain technical areas, but because they have the background in writing and rhetoric studies, can sort of communicate that to a wider audience.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, at least for me, like the reason that writing is enduringly fascinating is because I sometimes tell my students in my classes, writing is like Soylent Green. Writing is people. It's people. The name of one of our gateway courses that I teach a lot is called Writing as a Social Practice. And really that's kind of like the thesis statement for the whole class is that writing is a social practice. We have a lot of ideas about what writing and writers are that a sort of somebody scribbling away alone in a garret, or waiting for the muse or you sit and you take tests by yourself and they're kind of miserable and nobody that ever reads that writing and it's just for a test. And really, writing is exciting to us and the way that we think about writing is exciting, I think, to a lot of students because really we're looking at the ways that writing has been so many different things in so many different places and times and cultures. It touches all aspects of our lives at this point. We're at this really interesting moment in our own cultural history where we write more than we read, which is pretty unprecedented. But if you think about all the digital technologies, texting, and the various ways that we communicate with each other, it's now so ubiquitous, and it plays this role in performing a kind of gatekeeping function in keeping certain kinds of people who have access to certain kinds of ways of writing in positions of power or authority or privilege. But it's also this amazing technology that people use to challenge some of the constraints that have been put on them and sort of assert a voice and make themselves heard in these spaces. So the fact that writing does both of those things all the time, because writing is people and people use this technology to do that, I think is why we connect to just about anything you might study or do, but also why it's so fun to be thinking about what that means and get away from the really narrow, isolated, individualized ways that many of us are taught to think about writing in school, and really recognize it as this like profoundly social practice.
That was Christie Toth of the University of Utah's Department of Writing and Rhetoric Studies. Visit humanities.utah.edu for more information about her department and the other areas of study offered through the College of Humanities.